Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contour Community Meeting. Today is January 26th, 2021, and let's talk about what we've been working on, starting with Steve K.
Yeah, just a quick update. So the local rate limiting PR that I was talking about last week has been merged, so that will ship for 1.12. It's got docs and everything, and working on a blog post that'll cover it as well. So that should be good to go. And then I've started working on the global rate limiting implementation as well. And my plan is to get that into 1.13. I have some basic code working at this point, so I really need to focus on corner cases, testing, and documentation over the next couple of weeks probably. And that's about it for me.
Nice. Do you have a draft of the blog post?
I do, yeah. I'll put a PR up after this meeting and send it out for folks to look at.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next up, stevesloka.
Hello. So I did a little bit of work with service APIs to get just some stuff in. So the first one here, which is actually merged, this adds initial scaffolding bits. So basically, it adds a service APIs processor, and then adds it to the builder. So now that the queues have been getting filled. So I guess to roll back a little bit, I updated to Contour to use the 0.1 release of service APIs. So that's kind of the latest, line in the sand. Which right now we actually will watch for all the resources. So gateway classes, all those different bits, and they get added to local caches. The second part of that then is to start processing through all those different bits that we're caching. So the first one was adding the processor bit. So that's the actual spot where we'll actually add the implementation to actually process through all the things. And then this one here will just basically filter out any gateway classes that we don't care about. So they don't get added to the cache. So if someone had, say, some other ingress controller, Contour should ignore those. That's what this one is. So then the next step after this is then go and just start actually adding some work based on gateways and stuff. I know Nick still has a design doc in progress, but a lot of this stuff I think is just table stakes that we need to do anyway. That doesn't really relate to the decisions around how to actually implement service API. So that's it. Just a quick, update as to some of that work I started for everyone.
Cool. Any questions around this? All right. You want to talk about Ingress v1 as well?
Yeah, so that's the next step here. So there's some things. So Ingress v1 came out in 1.19, so it was formalized from v1 beta 1. It's mostly the same. There's a couple of new things. There's a bunch of different issues which we could link out. I should link to this issue, the other issues around Ingress v1. There's an ingress class now in the spec. There's a prefix type. So Contour has always been a path prefix type match for routes. But now there's a way that you can define, is it a path prefix or is it a exact match type, which is new. And then there's a couple other things, I forget what they are, but they're in there. So some of it was I was just wanting to make us whole in terms of, we're an ingress controller for Kubernetes. We should match the spec that's out there in the world. So I was hoping to just get some of that stuff brought up to speed. And this was the initial bit here. So like the service APIs work, this elevates Contour into having watching the Ingress v1 resources and processing through them. One problem that we had was that the v1 and beta 1 v1 beta 1 objects and the v1 are different types, but mostly the same. So in this PR, what I actually did was I wrote a converter. So when the informers get spun up and we get, say, a v1 beta 1 ingress resource, we will actually now convert that to a v1 resource, and then we'll pass that down throughout Contour. So essentially from the informer pieces back, we'll be assuming everything's a v1 type ingress resource. So then eventually we'll have to sunset v1 beta 1 at some point in the future whenever that rolls off. Whenever 1.19 is our earliest Kubernetes supported version, then we can sunset all the v1 beta 1 stuff. So that's it. So now that we have this in here, we can add the other bits in there without having to do all this kind of integration work. What was the last thing I was going to say? Oh, we're going to hold on this too. We were going to hold on this just until after the release, since we're going to release this week. It does have some work in the informers bit and stuff, so that we figured we would just, at this point, there's no features adding by this. So we'll wait on this. do the release, and then we'll merge it, and then have some more time to really make sure that this doesn't break anything else.
Sounds good.
Yep, that's all.
Any questions there?
I had a question. I heard that a release is happening this week. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think that was sort of the idea, because it's been it's the end of the month again. We can chat about what that means for the operator. I guess, if there's things that need to get done, we can adjust that date. There's nothing hard in stone with that date. It was just sort of end of the month again.
Yeah, which I guess leads me into pushing Contour operator PRs forward. So we've got I think like a half dozen PRs, and there's some of them that I would like to include in the release that I think have been hanging out and baking for a while. If we look at the list of PRs, let's see here. Jonas, can you click on that PRs for me? Thanks. That very top one, 181, is super straightforward. So if we could get that tagged, and that's just HTTP proxy. CRD was bumped by Steve Chris, and just adding those changes to the operator. If we go back to the PR list, Jonas, this next one, 180, is a big one. So this is kind of the foundation for adding separate controllers for service APIs, controller for gateway, another controller for gateway class. So I'm working on a PR that builds on this. With refactoring kind of the package structure, I look to how the packages are designed for Contour and tried to align the best I could there. This creates a config package. So there was kind of operator config bits in different packages, and this the config package centralizes a configuration. So for example, when we need to bump the Envoy container image used by the operator to manage Envoy, before there was 3 different places that you had updated. Now you just simply need to go to the config package and update the default Envoy image name, whatever that variable is. What else here? And then the rest of this is just changing certain struct fields from global to local, and some of that basic stuff. But this is, like I said, important for me with working through service APIs. If we go back to the PR list really quick, that's a whip, not a big deal. I need to look why that didn't pass. I just pushed a new change of that. The service, let's not worry about this. If it's not passing, then I'll go back and see why that is not the case. So if we go back to the PR list, Jonas, the service API design doc, I just commented there, just asking, is there anything else that we need to do to get this merged? Let's see, adds README. That was from our previous release where I didn't, there's just some documentation needs to be updated. And I think some minor updates to the release script. So that should be pretty straightforward. These last two.
Real quick, that 167, there was an issue in there that needs fixed up. The script, the variables didn't work. So I ran a quick test, and I think the old version, new version were down below those new variables, and then they don't get applied properly. So they just need to get moved up, and then it'll work. So it should be real quick.
Yeah, thank you for that. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll look at this one as well if we go back. These last two are kind of the big ones, and it'd be awesome to get these in for the upcoming release, because I think it's a really nice feature. It is part of what we want to support for service APIs, but it's not, service APIs is not required, right? So this is the whole network publishing API. And I went and implemented some updates to it here recently based on that design spec that Nick put together last week, I think it was, where we talk about Contour supporting multiple container ports, multiple listeners, and not just the secure and insecure. So my updated network publishing API, and in my opinion, this is ready to go, both the API as well as the implementation. So if we can take a look at that, and it'd be really awesome to get these added to the next release. That's about it.
Awesome. Lots of good stuff in there. Any questions for Danny?
No, I don't have any questions. I did a quick run through today of all that. So I'll look at your comments. I saw a bunch of GitHub pop-ups on my phone. So I'll look through those. And then I think the API there, it looks good to me. I think we can just start implementing it and then, to see how that goes. And then as we move through alpha, beta, we'll see how that looks. But I think the API looks good. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we can set the milestone dates, I don't know if it's set for Project Contour, but it'd be nice to set the milestone date for Contour Operator. And then with that date too is, I thought we were not doing a release for January because of the holidays. So my vote would be that we release next week so that we stay on that target of beginning of each month kind of thing.
I just added an agenda item to our maintainer meeting to hopefully get an agreement once and for all on what our release schedule is, so that we're all on the same page and nobody's surprised. I think if we say last Thursday of the month or first Tuesday of the month or whatever it is, then everyone just knows ahead of time what to expect.
Yeah, we just put it in our calendars.
Every 6 months? No. Kidding. Yeah, that's good, Steve. Thank you for that. All right, Sunjay.
Yeah, just one thing for me. There's a link there to a design doc for offering more options for load balancing on different attributes of a request. I'll hopefully was hoping to get the implementation in for the 112, so hopefully have a polished up PR in the next couple of days, or today, tomorrow, hopefully. So not too big of a feature, it's just additive, but yeah, should help with a couple open issues that we have.
Have we talked about that? No, this is a new one. We haven't talked about this on a community meeting before, right?
I don't think so. Generally, people have asked in a couple issues about being able to configure Envoy to load balance on different attributes of a request. So Envoy offers the ability to load balance. Basically, it hashes some attribute of a request. Could be a request header, a cookie value, a query parameter value, or a couple other different options. Yeah, so this starts to expose that. Initially only gonna support configuring the ability to hash based on a header value, but we may quickly follow on later with other attributes as people ask for them. Yeah, so there's a design. I guess it's been approved, but if anyone needs to look at it, should look at it and comment and ask any questions.
Cool. Thank you. Any questions, comments on this? All right. Then we'll dive into discussion topics. Danian.
Jonas, if you check the chat window, I just put a link specifically or that references the specific section of the API. So if you go to the chat window, click on that link, it'll take you right to the field that I'm talking about here. There it is. You see some of the kube builder defaults if you scroll down just a little bit. Right, and you see the Go documentation. So one of the changes, one of the big changes here recently with this network publishing API is incorporating the multi-listener design that Nick put together the other week. And so now you can specify an arbitrary number of container ports to expose on Envoy. But there are some limitations that that I put here, and you'll see the min items, right? So you see the defaults that are highlighted here by Jonas, right? So if nothing's specified, the two container ports here, one for HTTP on 8080, the other one on 8443 for HTTPS, will be created. Users can, specify their own container ports, but you'll see that they need to at least specify two, and they need at least one for named HTTP for Envoy's insecure service and one for HTTPS for Envoy's secure service. I wasn't sure if, is it possible to have both secure and insecure on the same container port? And so that was maybe one of kind of the top of mind question to me is A, can it be done? And B, is there even a use case for it if it can be done?
They should be on different listeners, so I don't think you can have the same port.
Okay.
We may want to think about, and this is, I think I put in Nick's design doc about making the names, at least for these two ports, not configurable, and having a convention that the one named HTTP is the insecure port and the one named HTTPS is the secure one. And this would help if we had, three different listeners to know which port is the insecure one, which one is the secure one for redirects and that sort of stuff. I think would be interesting and would be helpful. So again, we can always change it later, but that was sort of my comment in there of making the names not configurable, what the ports could be, I guess.
Yeah, making them require that, hey, you at least need two listeners, one HTTP, default 8080, and the other one HTTPS for 8443. Did I understand you correctly, Steve?
Yeah, I think we need to allow users to define at least two. I guess my comment was more around and not letting them define the name of the ports, at least for these two. So
right.
Yeah. I mean,
So yeah, we're on the same page here, and that's why I'm saying is, hey, if you go ahead and manually create container ports, they're going to be invalid unless you have one for HTTP, which we use for Envoy's insecure service, and one for HTTPS, which we use for Envoy's secure service. So, and the implementation, which is the implementation of this network publishing API, you'll see that I spent time doing like validation, basically implementing this contract here, that we validate the ports and make sure that there's at least the HTTP and HTTPS port names. And what we do, or what the operator does, is search through this container ports list, and it'll consider the contour custom resource invalid unless it meets the contract for these container ports. And if it does meet this contract, then it'll use the HTTP container port for Envoy's Kubernetes service HTTP endpoint, and the same for the HTTPS. What I wanted to do is get away with separate fields, just for like the default HTTP port, default HTTPS port. So we have, this one field for container ports, with the understanding that here's the contract, right? Is, you need to at least have these two ports. If you want to specify more, great, which leads me to my other question, which is line 161. Do we think max listeners or max ports of 6 is acceptable, or I just kind of, I don't know, just took a shot in the dark at it. So wanted to implement some kind of max validation so someone doesn't create 1,000 container ports, right? And I just thought, okay, minimum 2 makes sense if you need to have one for HTTP, one for Envoy's HTTPS. So that'd give us a minimum of 2, but a maximum of 6. Unless there's a real use case out there, I think that seems to be like a reasonable maximum at this time.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think for L7 there isn't that much need for a lot of extra listeners. I think for an L4 we would definitely need more probably, but I think in this case I think that's fine. Yeah, I think 6 is a lot, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's more preventing against like fat fingering configuration potentially than anything, but it seems fine, and we can always adjust if we need to.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm like, it seems like a reasonable default. And if a use case presents itself that someone wants to create a bunch of listeners, after service APIs is implemented and so forth, then we can readdress the defaults here. But yeah, I've tested this out. Everything's good. So I'd really appreciate looking at this one as well as the implementation of this network publishing API and get this in before the release. So
I had a question about the the insecure port. I've seen in the past, at least in Cloud Foundry, where people who do security audits get really strict about anything even listening with plain text on a exposed port. Have we had that sort of experience with Contour at all? Like people want to shut off the plain HTTP listener and only allow listening on HTTPS?
Yeah, good point.
I think it has come up a couple times where folks wanted that. They wanted to, they had, I think, the redirect happening outside of Contour in terms of from any insecure to secure, and they only wanted the one. And there's not a way to do that today, to actually disable the plain. I can't talk today. The insecure port. So it has come up.
Steve, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. So you're saying right now there's no way to disable Contour's insecure listener?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. By default, when you start Contour without any ingress at all, no listeners are created at all. So you have nothing in Envoy. As soon as you create a single ingress resource, it doesn't matter how it happens, then you'll get the insecure listener, and you only have one. And then as soon as you create, add a cert to a vhost, then you'll get spun up the secure listener. And if that cert goes away, then the secure listener, I think, will get torn down, I believe. Maybe not. Yeah, but they only come in whenever they're needed. So yeah, there's not a way today to disable the insecure port on Envoy in Contour.
Does anyone know if there's an issue that's tracking this use case about being able to run Contour with the secure listener only?
I don't know. Let me go look real quick.
Yeah, if there is, I'd like to just be able to link to it, or I guess, I'd be reluctant to update this API to min items of 1 and saying that only the HTTPS container port is required. Be reluctant to update that until Contour actually supports it. But I'd like to include it in the documentation as a reminder to, and if not, then if everyone thinks it's appropriate, then I'll create the issue just so we have it tracked.
I found it. It's 2577.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to update the network publishing API here, this PR 151, but the only update that I'm going to do to it is just to link in this container ports Go docs, just a to-do that, hey, when this issue is resolved, we should change the min items and make the HTTPS the only required.
Now, I guess doing that we lose the ability to do the redirect, the 301 redirect from insecure to secure. So if you turn
Makes
off,
sense, yeah. I mean,
so just so that's clear I mean, I know you all probably know that, but we'll have to just document that if we do this or come up with a way.
Yeah, that feature sounds like not a small amount of work, because also if someone tries to make a ingress or HTTP proxy without any TLS information, then we'd have to just reject it, basically, right? So that's not.
Yeah, I think we'd have to, if we implemented this, we'd have to have some validation to look for the cert on a vhost. So it wouldn't, an object wouldn't be valid until we had all those bits there.
Mm-hmm.
For ingress, it'd be harder to validate in terms of there's no status on ingress itself, but for HTTP proxy or for service APIs, there's a spot to do that. So
might not be a bad idea capturing some of those stats in 2577. So if anyone gets a chance to work on this, have some of that mind share of yours. Cool.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad that we discussed this.
I don't know how likely or how soon on the agenda that item will come up, but at least from experience with security audits and people complaining about insecure ports, it could happen.
That's a great point.
All right. I see that issue has been updated. Is there anything else anyone want to talk about in the meeting today? All right. Then thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a fantastic rest of the week and see you all next week. Bye, folks.
Everyone.